Welcome, everyone. Welcome to using stock photos for authentic storytelling. I am Laura Quinn. Here is me twice. I am the editor of the nonprofit website Insider, which you should definitely check out if you haven't. It is a website with tons of free articles and information about managing websites for people who already have one. There is a newsletter that goes along with that. So every 2 weeks, you'll get some good information about managing websites. I am also a coach and a strategist for nonprofit websites. So what are we going to cover today? For those of you who've joined me before for these 30-minute webinars, they're a little bit of a neutron star of information. And some of it is kind of intended, particularly in this one, it's intended that you may come back to the slides. So for instance, I'm not going to spend tons of time on my list of stock photo sites. I'm just going to show you there is a list of stock photo sites, and you can come back to that to explore at your leisure. So we're going to talk about why stock photos. It's not a super popular thing to talk about. In fact, I'm kind of excited that 11 of you decided you wanted to show up live to talk about stock photos. I'm going to try to get more people in the future. Finding photos. So we'll go through a number of sources primarily so you can come back to them later, the lists. We'll talk about some of the more complicated legalities around stock photos. So what people call copyright trawl or trawler or copyright troll lawsuits, and another thing that you should be aware of. And then we'll talk about identifying the right photo. So we're talking a little bit in the chat before the session about, trying, some of these photos are so silly. They just feel off. Like, how do we know what off feels like, and how do we avoid those? So some of the basics, thinking about diversity, tying concepts to photos, which is often pretty tricky. Editing photos, why they can help. And I'm going to, as I was mentioning before, for those who are on just a little bit early, we're going to play a little bit of Stump Laura with stock photos. So unless you guys have a ton of great questions, which would be a good problem to have, I should have some time at the end to take some requests for stock photos that you've been either struggling with trying to find or you think might be tricky, for concepts that might be tricky, and I will see what I can do. All right, why stock photos? So why photos at all? Why images at all? They break up blocks of text, pull the eye, life, interest, and emotion to the site. So your own photos are always, most of the time, are the best option for your site, but stock photos can be a kind of a surprisingly decent alternative to stock photos. Illustrations are also quite valid, but they tend to be more complicated. So illustrations, having illustration style match, like unless you actually have a, house illustrator, which is not actually that expensive to have as a freelance person. But that tends to be less applicable. So you can see here, this is the Climate Reality Project, which is an environmental organization. They do a good job of just, this could be nothing but a bunch of headlines, but they kind of make this page more active and dynamic and give you like a hint of what you'll see within it. And these are clearly stock photos. There's nothing non-stock about them, but they are decent ones. And so they add to the page rather than detract. So why not just use AI? AI is getting better all the time, but some of the key reasons. So it's hard to proof them for small details that might just be kind of off or odd, like things that are too smooth looking, like chair legs that don't make sense, things like that. They tilt toward stereotypical representations. So you need to really have an eye towards that type of stuff. Um, each photo that you do uses about enough power to charge a phone. And if you assume, as per this last bullet, that you're not likely to get it the first try, so it's going to take 3 or 4 iterations, we are talking about non-negligible power for these photos, which then has environmental impact. Um, and they are tricky in my mind. Kyla mentions, not to mention water use, absolutely. And both the water use and the energy tend to be in communities where more marginalized, socially marginalized people live. So it gets ickier and ickier the further down the rabbit hole you go. Um, and they're trickier than you might think. So this is me taking one for the environment, on behalf of the environment, to show in this particular session. So I generated 4 images to get to this is the fourth. So I did an actual reasonable prompt, but you can see it's not that great. Like I said, I wanted it in a nonprofited office environment. There's so much stuff. There's a lot of clutter here. I said, okay, and it's not easy to crop this in any useful way. So I said, okay, please make them sitting down. Okay, take some of the crap out of the background. I've forgotten what the one in between this was, but this is me reasonably trying. And it's just like it's doing things that a photographer wouldn't do. Like you've got a like thing in the background which distracts from their head, you know, as opposed to like this one I found in, about a minute. This is a way more authentic photo. These are actual people. They are in a naturally what feels like kind of a nonprofit environment, like so much more of an authentic photo, even though this is a stock photo. By the way, I have captioned all of the stock photos I've used in here so kind of best practice is to caption the name of the person. It looks like an email address, but it is the name of the person from the site, where I got it from. Unsplash is a stock photo site, and whether or not I am required to credit it. So basically, there's only 1 or 2 sites that I'm using where I literally need to put this stuff on. I put it on all the things so you could see where it's from, but many of these sites don't require you to put it on. Oh, thank you, Kristen, for mentioning the cat sweater. Yes, I also love the cat sweater, and it's a type of detail that you're never going to get from AI in some kind of authentic, useful way. Like, it's either going to be awful or, yeah, I mean, this is just a cat sweater that this woman liked and is wearing in the office, like she's a human, she's a person. Um, and we don't talk about this all that much, but professional graphic designers use stock photos all the time. So basically, any big site that has been created by graphic designers, unless that nonprofit has invested a lot in photography, which some of them do, but not a lot, there is stock photos. So here's the Environmental Defense Fund, which is huge. Their stock photos aren't even very good. Like we can do better than these stock photos, yeah, on our sites. This is a site that I was involved in, but had a pretty big budget and had a professional graphic design, among other things, firm. And here's a bunch of stock photos, just kind of representing, okay, the humans that this organization helps. All right. So finding photos. So there's 3 big free sites that are kind of general use. Um, all of these photos can be used and modified without credit. Although credit is always best practice. And it's useful to have on your website like a teeny place to put a credit. So Unsplash, Canva, Pro especially, the not Pro is not great photos, but Pro is free to nonprofits, um, and Pexel. Um, I'm not going to, as I said, go into these in a lot of detail because you can explore them at your leisure. Here's, in fact, a whole list of other things. Specialty free photo sites. So these are, for the most part, sites that are publishing high quality stock photos because they want to represent their community better and more. So nappy.co is black and brown people, disabled and here, people who are both BIPOC and disabled. EDU images is schools. Gender spectrum collection is images of trans and non-binary models. The National Park Service. So it's the government, the US government had, it, not everything is open, especially open to modify, but many things are. The National Park Service I find particularly useful because it has pictures of nature, historical sites, and people working in nature and historical sites. Um, and there's the URL there. If you are using a fair amount of stock photos, it's definitely worth considering a paid site. So something like $30 a month for something like Adobe Stock Images, Shutterstock, or there's a million of these. Um, so think through how much time. I mean, if you're spending 3 hours a month on finding stock photos for, 5 different articles, then I mean your time is worth more than $10 an hour, and you should probably consider investing. The search is much better, is the main thing that it offers. So you don't need to, go to as many places. All right. So one of the considerations when you think about stock photos is what are called copyright trawls, or is this sometimes called trolls or trawlers? So this is people doing, so not very friendly people doing scans to find unlicensed images, and then they shotgun out either snail mail letters or emails with threats, usually threats that you need to pay a substantial amount of money. So using stock photos diligently and appropriately will let you avoid all of this. So this is only a problem if you are um, primarily you're pulling commonly pulled images that aren't actually stock photos, that are you're just kind of pulling things willy-nilly from the web. So you only want to use images from reputable sources with confirmed open licenses. So you don't want to just go to anything that claims that it's stock photos. You want to make sure that other people recommend and like these stock photo sites. And you want to make sure that the license is allows you to actually use them. All of the sites that I've talked about are in fact those, but you can look at the license terms and ensure that that is true. And it's worthwhile to document the URL and the date that you got that image. So if somebody does indeed, it's not that likely, but if somebody comes to you in a year and says you're using this image, pay us, you'll be able to say, okay, I got it here on this date. Maybe it's not up anymore, but it was licensed when I got it, and that is valid. Um, you also want to consider what's called the right of publicity. So that is a person saying, um, I did not give my permission for this site to be used, for this photo to be used in such an open way. So, for instance, someone took the picture and put it up on Pexels, but they didn't actually have a photo disclosure from the person themselves. This isn't that common. There's most of the photos that are on those sites do have a photo disclosure, and the person is very aware that they're there. Um, but the free photo sites rarely guarantee this permission. So it's a risk, especially if you're using it for fundraising. The right of publicity, so people tend to care much more about publicity if they are um, affirming something. They're basically putting their likeness to say, essentially, I recommend this. This is less likely to be an issue for a nonprofit, especially a non-controversial nonprofit, than it is if like it's used in an advertisement or whatever. Um, but a couple things. It's particularly valuable to use your own photos for fundraising. So less compelling to use kind of miscellaneous assorted people for fundraising. Or look for the specialty sites. Most of the specialty sites, like I've taken a photo from Disabled and Here, um, do guarantee photo disclosures, so this woman has in fact signed a model release. Um, Also, the paid sites generally have a model release guarantee. You'll still want to obviously think about, so to be ethical about this, you want to think about what you say about this woman. Like saying this woman was, I don't know, selling lemonade at your bake sale is, I think it's legally okay, but it's not ethically okay. Like she wasn't selling lemonade at your bake sale. Um, so she's pretty clearly to me, and you could crop her a little bit and do some other thing, but to my mind, she is on that site because she is excited about promoting disability rights. And so I worry a little bit about taking her out of context. You have the legal right to take her out of context, but gets a little iffy. Right. Let's talk about identifying the right photo for you. Okay, so what should you look for to distinguish a kind of a good stock photo from a bad stock photo? High contrast. So you want to make sure that the photo isn't kind of just murky, so it's hard to see what's going on here. The subject is kind of set apart from other things. This is back to our AI versus non-AI example. Like there's too much stuff. There is too many chair, table, things that are not these women. So they become kind of just hard to focus. They come literally hard to focus on. That's also a problem with this photo. So you've got, I assume we're supposed to be looking at hands and coffee cups, but we've got this plant kind of weirdly at the focal point. And you want to look for candid action. So as opposed to somebody who looks like they're acting, I mean, obviously it's hard to know whether it was literally candid. But if you can't tell the difference between whether they're candid or whether they look like they're acting, um, that works. This woman here at the bottom just looks a little like she's not using that tablet. It's not really a candid smile. It's just a kind of an awkward picture. So as opposed to this woman, even though she's not looking at the camera, she's clearly, I mean, at least pretending well that she's doing something. Thinking about authentic diversity. So basically, thinking um, about how, so if you are representing traditionally underrepresented groups, um, and representing diversity on your website, how do you avoid tokenism? How do you make sure that you're doing it authentically? So think about having much of the time. I mean, obviously, it doesn't have to be in absolutely every picture. Um, Making sure they're main characters. They're not just kind of like sitting in the audience. They're not the secretary, God forbid, in like all the pictures, like all your pictures has like doctors who are white guys and like a nurse who is Latina. Um, so thinking about intersectional diversity, these are a little harder to find, but it's showing seniors who are also Asian, as I have here, feels more authentic than just like, here's some happy seniors or here's some happy Asian people, because we've also got some, I don't know, cultural markers and environments. They aren't in an IKEA house. This kid, I don't know if they're actually cultural, but whatever these little ribbons are on the baby are kind of adorable. It's not generic. The door is not generic. So basically moving away from the generic towards something that says something. And that's just honestly a good stock photo, something that says something about the people. Concepts. Some of the hardest stock photos are when you are trying to represent a concept for like you've just published a report, and here's the example that I used. People can't get out from crushing debt is what you want to represent as an image for your report. I actually used that as kind of my starting prompt. Um, and I kind of went to they're under a boulder, and you've got the very stereotypical like anvil here. You want to move away from just, okay, what's really expected. I um, I searched Shutterstock and Adobe, so the paid sites have much better keywording. So if I search for something like crushing debt, it will help me out by showing me potentially some images that might not be so terrible. Also, thinking what emotion you want to evoke. So as I was looking, so it gave me some, I started thinking through boulders and I was looking for boulders. And then it started giving me things that were kind of precariously balanced boulders. And I liked that. And so I said, oh, well, what about precarious? And I got to some of these. These are like, they're not literally being crushed under debt in any at all sense of the word. And if they were, like, if I could find someone literally being crushed, that would be awful and we wouldn't want it. Um, so, but these are kind of the feeling of it's all gonna come apart, like just one hand slips and which is, I like it for this particular concept. Another thing just to do is to try to relate it to nature because there are lots of nature stock photos because people take lots of photos on their vacations and then put them on stock photo sites. So if you can come up with some kind of nature analogy, person in nature analogy, that often works. And don't forget that you can crop. And in fact, I find myself cropping probably most of the time. Um, so this is a woman from the Disabled in Here project. She's actually doing, if you look, she's doing something with cards, which I know through the alt text they gave is a tarot card reading. So probably a tarot card reading is not like I don't really want people fiddling with cards, but she can easily not fiddling with, like, this could be a lot of things that she's looking at, and it's still, it doesn't take her out of context, especially because a lot of the context here is the intersectionality. She's got the nasal cannula, and she's also a woman of color. And here, in fact, it's a little less compelling, I think, cropped all the way down, just because she's looking at something and you can't see what she's looking at. But you could crop her all the way down. Remember to check that modification is allowed. Stock photo sites almost always do. Not all of the specialty sites. This particular one does, but not all of the specialty sites do. And the rule of thirds is just useful for keeping in mind. That's basically thinking that somebody's face probably shouldn't be smack dab in, or eyes, or your focal point shouldn't be smack dab in the middle. All right, I have cleverly left myself 3 minutes for doing my photo search. Um, Actually, what I'll do maybe is I'll take any questions that you might have, and then I'll turn off the recording. So we have a nice, tidy 30-minute recording. And I will, in fact, do for anybody who wants to stick around and ask me to find some stock photos. I'll do some demo of that. Questions in our last 2 minutes. I'm going to turn off the recording because we've got a nice pause.